Welcome to the Startup Grind.
We've got Patrick from 99Designs. Come on, here we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just quickly, you're over here.
Okay.
Startup Grind is so we're going to do things a little bit differently tonight because Patrick's actually got an introduction, so it's a bit different.
Yeah.
But just quickly, Startup Grind started in Silicon Valley. I think it was like a couple of guys after work, and they just got together and they were talking about their startup. And eventually some other guys came into the office, and then eventually they invited a speaker along, and then it just escalated from there. There's about almost 50 chapters around the world right now doing the same thing that we're doing right now everywhere around the world. But Startup Grind has a special place for 99Designs. 99Designs kind of has a special place for Startup Grind. So they sponsored this event, and we'll tell you why. This is the story.
And before you press this play,
Yep.
this is a more than a world exclusive because this is like a rough cut. So we actually had to pull it off someone's desk and get it here tonight because we thought it was appropriate. So
Well, yeah, I was actually talking to Derek, our founder, today.
Yeah.
He hadn't even seen it.
No one's seen it.
Yeah.
Our team hasn't seen it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Can everyone hear
My
that?
name is Derek Anderson. I'm the founder of Startup Grind, which is an organization that helps inspire, educate, and connect entrepreneurs around the world. About 3 or 4 years ago, we started hosting these Startup Grind events. We had 9 people, we had 10 people, we had 4 people come 1 month, but we just did it. Every single month we did it. And eventually we had more than 200 people attending these events. I just think when you're in a big company, you have all these people you can rely on. When you're in a startup, it's just you. You're in a literal garage or a proverbial garage. No one cares what you're working on except your parents. And you have to find other people that you can come together with. That is what the startup community is. It's entrepreneurs looking out for each other. It's entrepreneurs trying to help each other be successful because we really don't have anyone else. I decided I wanted to build a website, but I didn't know who was going to design it. And so a friend of mine said, well, you have to go try 99Designs. This site is awesome. I'm like, whatever. I can do a contest. And the next thing I know, there's all these people working on it. And there was one design that we found that it felt unique. It felt like the designer really put something special into it. He won the design. And a few months later, I started to design a new product. And I thought, I've got to go talk to Joel Fernandez again. He did a great job, that guy from 99Designs. I met an amazing designer who became my business partner, who built a product with me that got acquired and sold, and who is now working with me again, and that's all thanks to 99Designs. I've probably recommended 99Designs 50 times. It's because 99Designs has the best designs that you can find on the web at the best price, with the best process. My name is Derek Anderson. I'm the founder of Startup Grind, and I use 99Designs.
So yeah, it's a pretty cool story. The fact that
Yeah, it is cool.
Yeah, so the founders met on 99Designs. I think it's pretty cool.
It's really cool. I mean, when I actually met Derek for the first time and he started telling me this story, I was like, oh man, can I get you on tape? He's like, yeah, sure. I love you guys. So I was like, thank God. Yeah, but it's not often. In fact, what he didn't say was that his founder was actually based in Portugal at the time. And so now he's moved to, I think he's in Canada, but they've sort of got closer in time zone. And so now they're able to collaborate. And they've always collaborated online. And this is like venture number 3 for them now.
Yeah, I think the big one they sold was to Inc. or something like that. Yeah.
Right.
So he's doing all right.
Cool.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
I'm just going to make this intro and then...
Is this working? Yeah.
No.
Okay, cool. Okay,
So
cool.
I'm going to give you this microphone. So for everyone that hasn't been to Startup Grind, basically we're going to run through the story of 99Designs and from Patrick's perspective. At the end, you'll be able to ask some questions, pick his brain a little bit, whatever. Hopefully I'm asking the questions that you're thinking about along the way. But yeah, it's just really informal.
Mm-hmm.
Hear your story, how you started, how you grew, and how you got such a fan base.
Okay, cool.
First of all, anyone that doesn't know 99Designs, they're the premier design marketplace. Basically, that you post up your project, whether that's a logo or a design for a website, and people compete based on the amount you put up. Usually, the more money you put up, the better response you get. And you pick the winner. So you always get you get about maybe 50 designs for your money, which is brilliant because you're bound to like one of them. Now,
Cool.
So we're going to start right from your background, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I think I don't know. I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about at the beginning about how we started, because I think in some ways that's more interesting, and it puts some context to why we're even here.
Please do.
Cool. So I think what really is interesting is that, one, it's the first time I've ever spoken to a Melbourne crowd. So normally I'm telling a story about how this little company from Melbourne has, moved on to become a slightly bigger company around the world. So it's nice to be home. This is my hometown, but I haven't lived here for some time. So it was good to be back on the weekend and go to the footy and eat a pie and drink some Carlton Draft, even if it was mid-strength. But no. So I think, our story starts way, way back. So in fact, the two founders of 99Designs, and I'm not one of them. So I joined.
Sorry, that was my
So I was very lucky to join 99Designs. I think we were about 10 people, and I joined in September of '09. But I want to take you back further. So there's a business in Melbourne called SitePoint.com, which started in 1999. And that's in fact where we came from. So we spun out of there in February of 2008. But SitePoint's a really crazy story because Mark Harbottle, who's the co-founder based here in Melbourne, was working for Sausage Software. So has anyone else worked for Sausage here, or at least knows of them? They were kind of our .com darling of the late 90s, early 2000s. And so Mark was working for Sausage as a marketing manager. And he was selling the hot dog product, which was one of the first websites in a box. You kind of got a bunch of discs in the mail. And he was finding success through this little site called Webmaster Resources, and it was quite an effective channel for him. And so he was looking at this Webmaster Resources and thinking, wow, this site looks like shit. I think there's something to it though. And so he actually reached out to the founder of this business, a guy called Matt, who's our co-founder, and said, hey, I think you've got something, but I think I could help you. And I'm actually thinking about doing my own thing. So why don't you fly out to Australia and we spend some time together and see if we can't create a partnership? Matt's like, yeah, sure, I'm only 17. And Matt had in fact been running Webmaster Resources for over 3 years by this stage, and started his first business at 13, was driving a BMW at 15, and as he says, earning more money than his parents at that point. But and so Matt and his mum flew out to Melbourne to meet with this Mark Harbottle character, and the two of them created this unlikely alliance. And so our history is kind of pretty interesting in that we've always had one co-founder in Vancouver who's operated out of his bedroom, and not a literal bedroom, his actual bedroom, and that bedroom's got bigger and bigger. And then we've had Mark based here in Melbourne, and he's the one who's built the development team and essentially built the products from here in Melbourne. And so that ethos is still something that we carry today. So 99Designs, we build everything here in Melbourne as well, and now we sell it around the world. So back to the SitePoint story. So SitePoint was a site. Anyone been to SitePoint? Yeah, so great place to learn about anything, but predominantly development and design. Had a big audience, was monetizing it through ads. Ad market disappeared in 2001. The guys were like, what do we do? They started selling real books. So in fact, they became a publisher, and they distribute those books through Amazon and O'Reilly. Basically, how-to. Somewhere between a university textbook and something for dummies, right? So it was kind of like the professional's guide to learning a new skill, but you didn't want to go back to school to do it. And so, a lot of them are about design or new languages, etc. Okay? Yeah. And so part of the community that they built was two very active forums. So there was a designer forum and a developer forum. And so it was in the designer forum that in fact our business started. So the designers were playing a game called Photoshop Tennis, where for fun, one designer would create a fictional brief, and other designers would then submit designs to it, and then they'd basically have an informal vote, right? And so this was just like an ongoing activity that would happen in the forum thread. And then one day, one of the designers, lucky for us, said, hey, I promised a logo for a website customer. I don't really like doing logos. You guys seem to love doing them for fun. How about you do it to my brief, submit them to me, and if I pick one of you, I'll pay you. The designer's like, yeah, you know. We do it for fun, we'll do it for money. And so essentially that's how our business model started. So our business model was this very organic experience where initially it was designer to designer, using it as a way to source work from each other. So taking advantage of different skill sets. I don't like doing print, I don't like doing web, I don't like doing logos, etc. Then the developers heard about it, and so they started to pile in, because for them they're like, wow, this is a really cool way to get design. And then we had a very, very messy forum. And so that was really the case. And then from there, we built a minimum viable product, which was around, first step was charge people to list and see if in fact there was a business at all, you know, because there was one assumption that maybe if we just charged people, it would go away. And it didn't go away, it continued to build. And then from there, we had this value proposition that we could test, and we started to learn about what it is that designers needed and what customers needed. And so a minimum viable product was built, and then 99Designs was spun out in February of 2008. So it was spun out of SitePoint. It had two developers, Lachlan and Paul. You know, and so we basically were incubated within another business, but it was like having a benevolent parent. So the first iteration was we didn't have to pay any rent, we didn't have to pay for broadband, but we had to, you know, the two salaries could be covered. And Mark was kind of like management was provided for free. And then we eventually built up from there to the point where, you know, I joined in September of 2009. We already had Jason in place sitting out the front here. He was sort of our general manager at the time. And so my remit along with the business was like, cool, how do we continue to facilitate our growth? And so to this point, it had all been done through cash flow. So we, you know, kind of had good growth month on month, all based on word of mouth. And so we're like, cool, let's essentially see if we can't facilitate an exponential jump in that. And our strategy around that was to set up an office in North America. So we'd already had one guy who was on the ground operating from his bedroom over there. And then I moved across in February of 2010.
Yeah, but can you just take it,
Yeah.
I take it a little bit back? Sorry for anyone that doesn't know, we've got the 99Design guys here. We've also got Zendesk here too. I just want to thank them because they sponsor it. SitePoint must have been making a little bit of money to allow you to work on this, right? At this point.
Sure. Yeah, no, it was. So it was, but it really, I mean, fairly quickly, 99Designs was washing its own face, like immediately. And SitePoint never raised really any money either. So SitePoint had a little bit of angel funding back in 2000. And essentially, though, it had always operated within its own cash flow. So SitePoint was essentially a bootstrap business. The 99Designs was a bootstrap business. In fact, you know, SitePoint subsequently spun out. So that developer forum that I talked about is now a business called Flipper.com. So it's the largest marketplace for buying and selling websites in the world. And so that was also a naturally occurring behavior in the developer forum. They were trading amongst themselves. The guys recognized an opportunity. Same sort of process went from there. So SitePoint's essentially turned into an incubator based on the fact that it has lots of traffic, but it's certainly the discipline that it's applied to the businesses is that you've got to be able to sink or swim very quickly.
All right.
Right. And so if you sink, you know, not all ideas have worked with that we've tried to spin out of there. You know, you sink, otherwise you have to swim. And so, you know, from the very early days, it was all about, right, we could only hire people as we could afford them. And I think we still try to apply that ethos almost to today. So it's kind of ingrained in us. It's hard to break that, being very conservative with the way in which you spend.
So was that Mark was making the call to saying, you know, give it a try about Flipper, give it a try with 99Designs?
Sure.
That was it, and you got
so,
test it, and then
yeah, I mean, so, you know, it would be great to have Mark up here because, you know, I think he's the best product guy I've ever met. And so Mark's at his best when it's him and a couple of developers and maybe a UX designer. or two. But essentially, he loves it when it's just him and the idea, or a kernel or idea, or some user behavior that he's witnessed. Then he is applying a process around. And as soon as it gets to 4, 5, 6 people, he's like, too much to manage. And so, that's not his preference, right? So he brings in people to help him manage it, and he focuses on what he loves to do, which is build great products. And he's particularly good at building great products at that minimum viable point. So if you ever get a chance to meet him, he's a great guy to meet. He's around the Melbourne scene, and yeah, exactly. I don't know. He doesn't like talking much.
No, I heard there was a talker though. Who's the other guy?
Matt? No, Lenny.
Lenny.
Lenny likes to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
But so you guys are just kind of started this. You saw this thing happening in your forum. You thought, we'll give it a shot. I've heard this story from Jason. He's doing this, he's staring at me. Yeah. So then you gave it a shot, and it just worked, right? You have a background in raising capital and stuff as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
So when did it come to a point where like we're onto something big here?
So I think, for me, so Lenny, who we were just talking about, the good talker. So Lenny was a friend of mine that I knew from 2000, and so I actually had a look. He invested in SitePoint back then, and I actually looked at his term sheet, and so that was kind of my first ever exposure to SitePoint, was way back then. And so Lenny and I would catch up intermittently and talk about SitePoint, and then as sort of the kernel of what is 99Designs, he'd talk a little bit about that, and it kind of like would pass through and we'd just chat in general. Occasionally I'd get the opportunity to spend some time with Mark, but it was pretty infrequent. And then in about early 2009, so I was working in corporate advisory. That was my background. I did the sort of hard to do work here in Australia, which is raise first, second rounds of capital, and then also do small M&A transactions. So typically my sweet spot was operating between $5 and $50 million. So sort of the business that's available here in Australia. So Lenny asked me to speak with Mark about looking at the different assets. So Flipper had just spun out, 99Designs had been spun out for a year, SitePoint was there, and I was like, what are we doing with these different assets? Stop working at that on mute.
Hello.
Yeah. Cool. So we started talking about that, and we met, and then I started to get to look at the different businesses, and I quickly fell in love with 99Designs, and it wasn't hard to, because it was a pretty exciting story. But it also, for me, it's certainly I could see the relationship between it and some other businesses that I'd been working on. So I'd been working in the stock photography field, doing some advisory work for a company based in Sydney, and I was looking at what was happening in microstock. And so I was seeing this disruption that was occurring through iStock Photo and Fotolia and Shutterstock and these guys. And all of a sudden the light bulb flipped, and I was like, oh shit, this is just like 99Designs. Because when I first Googled 99Designs, I think the second post I saw was some graphic designers hating on us. And it was a lot like the stock photography industry, and when you Googled it, microstock, iStock, you would find positive comments, but you'd also see negative. And I think, for me, it was a bit of a sign. If you're doing something right, then typically not everyone's happy with you. And if you're disrupting an industry, then you're going to see that. And we certainly were doing that. And so
that's basically because, look, I did a diploma in graphics before I started my degree. Basically, when you start globalizing the design, everything becomes a bit cheaper, and people that were charging a crazy amount for, agencies that were charging crazy amount for design seem to be, getting that done here, right?
Yeah, certainly. I think what we found is that people who are potentially ill-informed about what we really do and what our true mission is, see it as a threat. Our view that anyone who's any good at design or is based in a place where they've got access to lots of work, then 99Designs is never a threat to them. And in fact, just like microstock photography, what we've done is expanded the market for graphic design. What we find is when we talk to our customers, most of them, when we surveyed them, I think 50% of them say, what was the alternative to using 99Designs? And it was doing it themselves, right? And so that's a lot like stock photography. People weren't, the fact was when photographs were $2,000, you weren't buying them to put them in your presentation. When they became $10, you did. And so the color, not the logos are, $10 on 99Designs, but all of a sudden spending $300, $500 becomes an alternative to doing it yourself versus potentially spending thousands of dollars with the design agency, and that's perhaps the paradigm that you're used to. And so what we definitely did find was when people used us, the user experience was enormous and the value they got from it was enormous. So we were able to really experience great viral growth to the point where for 3 years we spent no money on marketing, like zero. A little bit on PR, but that was very minor. And so what we've been able to do is really ride the wave of that communication, because what's great is for us, why you guys are all here, is everyone's pretty passionate at the beginning of a startup. And so if you get your identity, like the first thing that you've done is typically get a logo. Right.
Just keep cutting out, I think.
Yeah. I can just talk.
I think it's,
cool.
It's going to cut in now.
So typically when you first get a logo, cool. You get a logo. This is a pitch for 99Designs. So, but when you get it, you're excited. And typically you've been annoying your friends for ages about your idea, and you finally get to it. And then the first thing you actually have about commercializing that idea is a logo. So you end up talking about either showing it off or talking about the process you went to because you were blown away, right? Because it's really the beginning of that creative process. And so it's just like the excitement's palpable. And so that word of mouth certainly helped fuel our growth. And then on the designer side, it's the same sort of thing. All of a sudden designers were learning about this place where there was work that they could access. They didn't have to collect the money. They didn't have to find the work. It was just sitting there. They could view projects that they were interested in. If they found one that they liked, they could participate in it. They get to learn through the process. And when they were successful, they were actually building a customer base, typically for life. Because what we have found is that like 99Designs is, we talk about it internally about being a dating site for designers and small business owners. And in fact, a contest is almost like a nightclub. It's a bit noisy, there's quite a few people, you get to meet quite a few people, but you then meet someone and it's like that, great. And then you move on and you do other stuff together, you go on other dates. And so that's essentially our business. And so for designers, the savvy designers within our community, that's the value prop. It's like, great, I can be based in Ballarat or Bendigo or, quite frankly, Minnesota or, Jakarta, and I can get access to work. And when I have that connection, or if we think about Derek's example, Portugal, when I have that connection, I've met someone, it's great, and I facilitate and I develop a relationship, I built up trust, and then we work together on an ongoing basis. And so that's really how we powered it up. So designers kept coming, and in fact, for a long time we had no call to action for designers at all. In fact, it was almost like Fight Club. We had no idea how they worked out how to sign up, because a lot of our messaging was all focused on acquiring customers. And so, because we felt as a two-sided market that if we could find guys to pay designers, then the designers would come. And that's what we've been very successful at, is being able to balance the growth of our marketplace, continue to focus on both sides of the community, and we've had to do it at varying extremes. Sometimes we've done things where, we've all of a sudden seen massive ramp-ups in customers and we've had to run back and backfill for the designer side, and then likewise we go back, and it's kind of the ebbs and flows of business, and it's one of the beautiful things about being in a marketplace.
So I just read your stats. There's something like 50 million you're giving back to the community or something like that?
Yeah, like 53 million, I think, right now. Not counting or anything. Yeah.
Is there guys that are making, like, that's their wage now? Like, they're all the time they're just competing?
Sure. Yeah, so there's, we have a wide spectrum of people who participate on the designer side. So there is now lots of people who are full-time freelancers using 99Designs, but they're not full-time on our platform because it's like it's a lead gen tool, so you can see them come in and out. So they're successful, they win 2, 3, 4 contests in a row, then all of a sudden they disappear for 6 weeks as they're doing the ongoing work for the clients that they've met, and then they come back into the flow. Some of them have actually created businesses around it, so now they have other designers working for them and they're getting very good at managing it. So we actually have small teams working on site. And then we have like the classic freelancer or the moonlighter. So it's like, cool, I'm wanting to save up for a new car or a holiday or, a ring for the girlfriend or whatever it is. And so they're coming home from work, they're participating when they can, and then, they get busy at work again and they disappear. Or they are truly freelancers, and so when their book's busy from work that they've found through normal channels, then that's what they're busily doing, and then they come back in. Yeah.
So going back to the business 99Designs,
Mm-hmm.
I know for a fact, again, this is Jason's story, that you were always geared towards the USA, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was like always a .com. You couldn't buy anything but in US dollars.
Yeah.
Is that right? So you want to tell me about how it all got started like that?
Sure. So SitePoint's audience, Matt, because he started Webmaster Resources out of Canada, he had a North American audience, and because he was so young, he actually benefited from that kind of the shock value of a 15-year-old with this business. And so he actually generated quite a lot of publicity, and in fact, I think he'll tell us that he was the youngest blogger ever employed by Microsoft, something like that. So he kind of got a bit of early PR in the North American market. And so SitePoint, by turning Webmaster Resources into SitePoint, was in fact a North American business. So it was also just a .com, very focused on the North American market. So it was 80% of its traffic was coming from the US, 77% of that was men, I think. And so that was actually applied to us as well. So when 99 spun out, our audience, our traffic was just in the US essentially. You know, it was smattered around the world, but it was predominantly located in North America. So all of our focus was on that. And that was one of the drivers coming back to why did we set up shop in San Francisco, is we really wanted to be closer to our customers. It's really hard to support the US from Australia. Time zones don't work so well. And so, you know, we only provided email support. We did a little bit of chat, but it was really hard to make that work. And so when we moved across there, we hired a couple of customer support guys. It was really about getting close to our largest and most important market. And so, you know, that really benefited us. And so I think, you know, we can talk a little bit about that because I think it's kind of interesting. You know, so some of the lessons learned from that was, one of the first things we did was we put a phone number on our site, and it was amazing for us when the phone started to first ring. A lot of the first callers were just people saying g'day, or not g'day, because that's us, but they were saying hi, you know, and they were really just going, "You're real." We were like, "Yeah, we're here." And they're like, "Oh, great." And then they'd hang up and they would transact. And so it was really an interesting lesson for us about, you know, developing trust and creating a voice in which we could communicate with our customers. And so it really did help our information flow. It meant that, you know, our designers back here in Australia could talk to our customer support team, who were then talking in real time with our customers in the US. They could come across and spend time with this small office. And so that really helped us better understand the people that we were servicing. That's cool. So, you know, that was, it was actually a really interesting time for us. And so we moved across, we hired some people. We started for the first time focusing on building a business plan. We did that. We learned a lot about our business, you know, and it wasn't all beer and Skittles. It was actually 2010 was a reasonably tough time. Not tough, in it we were growing really well, but some of our key metrics that we didn't actually even realize were key metrics weren't growing at the rate that we wanted. And so that really helped us get a laser focus on what was important. And, you know, with, you know, our brilliant team back here in Australia, I think James came across and we did some user testing, and we did some here and we did some in the US, and we really started to get a strong handle on what we thought was going to make a difference in our workflow. We made some significant changes, and so then come 2011, we saw a massive spike up in the way our conversion rates. And so our traffic stayed pretty consistent, but we were able to convert it at a much better rate. And so that then saw another step up in growth, which then made us a lot more attractive. We got more confident in ourselves, because, you know, Mark's not much of a business plan guy, and I think when I first talked to him about a business plan, he was like, "That's a crock of shit, I don't believe in him." But when we were able to look at actually going through the process and creating a plan and thinking 1, 2, 3 years out, where did we want to be? And then we actually started to see ourselves achieving the things that we wrote down. Like, oh shit, there's some power in this. And so that also then started to give us a sense of belief in ourselves. So we're like, well, if someone wanted to give us some money, then maybe we actually understand what we want to spend it on, right? And for the first time, with metrics improving, we started to think, right, well, if we had extra money, we could spend it on marketing and maybe we could grow faster. So rather than constantly just being this conservative cash flow driven business, we could start to see a path forward about what we would do to invest. And so, we were, I think this kind of dovetails in, but we were pretty lucky. The fact was, with this North American audience, typically startups, so it was very San Francisco based in the early days. There were lots of startups getting logos and websites and, icons and different stuff designed on us. And then they would be talking to venture capitalists about their startup story, and how, just as we talked about how people were excited about this design process, entrepreneurs would be telling VCs about 99Designs and this great experience. And so even before we moved to the US, we'd had a lot of inbound interest. And so it's kind of ironic, it certainly shows you how different the two markets are. Because we were very US focused, and when you looked at us, it was a .com with US dollars. Most VCs thought they were in fact a US organization. The smart ones actually worked out that we want, but that didn't deter them. They would still reach out and want to talk to us. So we'd actually had, I don't know, probably 20 or 30 different VCs reach out to us before we'd even moved to the US. We never heard from an Australian venture capitalist. And so, we did after I joined, because I knew some of them and said, they go, what are you doing? And I'm like, I've joined this business, it's really interesting, but this is cool. But it was just like this. So when we got there and we got closer, we didn't want to talk to them because we didn't know what we'd spend their money on. And as we got more confident in what we would spend our money on, it started to make some more sense. So in March of 2011, we got very serious about it. And in April, we raised over $35 million from Excel Partners, who are, one of the best VC firms around. What makes them terrific for Australians is they'd already invested in Atlassian and Osphoric, so they weren't scared about investing in Australia. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. Their lawyers were super briefed in that process, so it meant that from beginning to end, I think we closed it in about 30 days or so. Yeah, I didn't sleep much for that period. None of us did, but it was a bit of a rapid sight, but yeah.
There's a lot of guys here, they're very, that always interested in how to raise capital for their own business stuff. Can you kind of go through that process, pretend like, the VCs weren't knocking on your door, but...
Yeah, so pretending that they're not knocking, you have to pretend that they are knocking, right? That's actually the key. You only need one to be partially interested and you can turn that into a deal. But I think it's very hard to fake no interest. And so we were lucky in that we did have that interest. And essentially what we were able to do was take a step back. And when we started to get serious about it, we actually almost interviewed them. And so we were able to think a lot about what it is that we would look for from a partner. Now, obviously, the best valuation was very important, certainly to the founders, but we also were looking for people that, we thought we could value add. And I think if any of you are thinking and talking to investors, for crying out loud, but act exactly like that, right? Because the money is important, but actually getting the relationship right is the most important thing. And if you don't interview the person who's giving you money and work out whether they are the right fit for you, then, potentially that's going to end in tears, right? Because, it's so much more than the money. And so I think you can do that even if you are pretending to a degree. I think about when we interview candidates at 99Designs, if they don't ask any questions, then we don't hire them. And I think sometimes we can get a little bit starstruck when we're talking to investors and you're so eager to get that first dollars, the cash in the tin, that you don't ask any questions about them. You're just trying to give them the information about that they're asking you. And it's really important to flip it. Think about things like, cool, can I talk to other people that you've invested in? Really like reference check them, just like an interview. Ask tough questions. Try and get some evidence around how can they prove their value to you other than the money. And I think if you do that, you've got a much better chance of earning their respect, making them think, oh wow, he really must have other people interested, or she, and then away you go.
So in terms of, again, for people, starting a business and they're looking to take it to the next level, and venture capitalists will want to see a good track record, or that you're hitting these metrics is the key thing, right?
I think that, the key thing is metrics. I think track record, is less important than a business that actually seems to be showing some traction. Everything's about traction today. I think it's much, some people with track records can go raise money for ideas, but everyone else has to have traction. And so you really need to be working as hard as you can to get your minimum viable product up to a point where you can show some traction. And it doesn't have to be a lot of attraction, and it can be sometimes reasonably fluffy metrics, but it's got to be showing all of those signs that there's people who are interested in looking like they're going to adopt it. And then that is the key tipping point. I think what I've certainly learned about the Valley since being there is that these guys are very outward focused and they're highly, highly active. There's large teams of young guys, young grads, smart grads who spend all of their days just scouring blogs and various forums looking to hear about what might be the next new thing. And so for you guys, as you're building a little bit of traction in what you're doing, if you can get a few people talking about that in a forum, in a blog, maybe you can get a friend to write a guest piece on it, whatever it is, right? These are the sorts of things that will start to get picked up, because it's all about creating third-party validation in this process and some sort of credibility to what you're building has an audience and has an opportunity.
So because I think there's a big misconception in Australia sometimes when I talk to people that come along for the first time or whatever, is that it's got to be much more than an idea. People think, I've got this idea, but that doesn't mean shit, right?
Yeah.
You got to show that it's you got some customers that are paying or something, some sort of metrics that they want to see. From there, if you've got a pretty good story to tell these venture capitalists, if you can get, look, I've never raised any money, if you can get one on the hook, right? That's easier to get the other venture capital, other firms interested, is that right?
That's right, because typically it's all of this self-validation. I think the thing that I've learned too, this is good because Australians, we're a bloody secretive bunch. And when you go to, this is not real natural for us. No one wants to actually sit up here and talk about what they're doing. They're like, geez, it's none of your business. And also what I've got to say is not that interesting. Now that is probably true with tonight, but I think, one of the things I learned when I was in the US was like, holy shit, I'd meet people and I would be meeting these guys and they'd be telling me about what they were doing, and I'm like, how many people are you guys? Like thinking they must be heaps bigger than us. They're like, oh, it's me. Yeah. You're like, wow. And so I think, whereas I'd meet an Australian and I'd be like, I've got an idea, but I can't tell you about it. You might steal it. Whereas in the US, people are selling their ideas like they've already raised 3 rounds. And I think that is a real differentiating thing. And you need to think about that, because your point is ideas are actually relatively easy to come by and executing on them is really, really hard. And so what people are looking for is people who not only have an idea, but some ability to execute. And so that's what you're looking to demonstrate. And in fact, the more you talk about your idea, the better chance you have of learning from others and refining it before you've even launched it. So don't be afraid to share it. Get out, talk about it, practice your pitch, because it's going to be important if you start to talk to people about investing in it. And inherently, that's shit that we're just not good at. It's not naturally, I don't think Australians typically are that good at it. And so it's something that we have to work harder at, because there's no doubt that we can build the best stuff in the world. We have the most talented engineers in the world. We have great schools, great infrastructure. Our government's actually pretty supportive. So there's no reason why we can't be successful. We've just got to believe that we can, and then get out and talk about it.
That's great. Thank you for that. So going back to the Excel partners, Excel partners.
Yeah.
So you raised 35 million.
Yeah, a little bit more.
A little bit more than that.
Yeah.
What was that day in the office when you came home and told that news?
I don't know. What did you guys think? For me, I don't think it was a bit of a blur. I'm not really sure. In fact, that whole month I can't really recall, because it was pretty intense to think that we did it, and we literally incorporated in the US, flipped our business up and raised that money in 30 days. So it was a pretty crazy time for us. But there's no doubt we were pretty excited. It was, I think the realization point for me came many, many months later. So when we moved to the Valley, and this is sort of a personal experience piece, but when we moved to the Valley, we got a tiny little room in an incubator at Pier 38. And Pier 38 was a great co-location space and a really vibrant place to be. it actually got shut down by the city of San Francisco for being unsafe. So it kind of gives you an impression of the standard of the place. And so we actually had a little room overlooking the Embarcadero that was really quite dingy. And so when I arrived, we had pretty nice offices at SitePoint, and when I arrived to Sarah, I was like, oh. So I think my first month, I looked at the guys, we had 4 of us, and I'm like, cool, you know, we're gonna do, have you guys heard about paintball? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, no, we're doing paint wall. And so what I did on a Friday night, we got beers, we bought some plants, because we all got to choose a pot plant. We bought some paint, we painted our office. And so I knew we'd made it when we moved to our new office in San Francisco, and I hadn't had to paint the walls, you know.
Brilliant.
And so at that point I was like, oh shit, we actually had architects help us do that, and yeah, so.
So you get this 35 million,
Mm-hmm.
that business plan that you used to have, obviously out the window.
No, that business plan is still rock steady, and I think it's actually amazing to us how much we've continued to follow it, how we've been able to achieve the goals that we've written. We've certainly tried to jump it up, and some things are now more possible than they were before, but I actually think what's pretty pleasing for us as a team and as a management team is the fact that a lot of the stuff we thought about has played out like we thought, and you know, we've started to focus on things differently. I've been talking quite a lot around the world about internationalization, because in the last 12 months, you know, we've gone from really just being here and in San Francisco to building quite a large footprint in Europe. So we acquired a business last year in Berlin. We now operate in 5 languages, and so we've done a lot of that stuff, and I think all of that's a lot more aggressive than we perhaps would have ever envisaged under our own plan. But I think the core things that we thought about the product and our platform and what it is that we're all about, which is, you know, creating opportunity for designers and really looking at creating the preeminent platform that connects designers with small business owners. And so all of that is still essentially the same mission, same vision, same product roadmap. We're just trying to accelerate on it. We've got an ability to hire more people to make it work.
So that's what it was getting, you know,
Yeah,
just scaling up straight away?
Yeah, I mean, scaling is like challenging as hell, and I think the things that we found most challenging was communication. You know, I think Australia, I've talked a lot about how awesome it is to build stuff here. It's not so awesome operating within dual time zones. We've also added another time zone, so now I really never know where I am, and I think 24/7 someone could be online. You know, so the challenges as you scale are, for us, were a lot around communication. You know, so making sure when you're a small team, it's pretty easy to make sure that this little plan that you've built that everyone understands, you can take them through it, you can review it, you can talk about it. As you start to get bigger, that's harder to do. So we really had to scale our ability to communicate, scale the way in which we communicate as a team. So we invested in things like video conferencing that we still need to invest more in, because we haven't quite nailed that. But we use that to communicate, you know. So we have all-ins every week where the San Francisco and the Australian teams are on. You know, Melbourne pitches one week, San Francisco pitches, so the teams talk about what they're working on. Management one that week talks about, you know, how we perform. So we're very open in the way in which we operate the business. So everyone gets to see the key metrics. Everyone knows what our goals are. They understand exactly where we operate. So we report back on those every month, and then we talk about what's coming back up. And so that's been really important for us to apply that discipline and start getting better at that. We still haven't cracked the nut on being able to communicate with Europe at the same time, because it is impossible. So we're working on our internal communication. You know, we're using Atlassian's Confluence. We use a lot of like collaboration tools. We're getting better at displaying our key metrics across all of the offices so that people can understand at any time where we're at, how we're performing. So yeah.
Were those first key hires that you made,
Mm-hmm.
the way I understand it is they're quite critical, is that right?
Yeah.
Because I've heard another guy that was sitting there, I can't remember who it was now, but was talking about you don't want it to be a point where you come into work on a Monday and you don't know who the hell is in the place.
Sure.
So how do you balance getting big but not too big too quickly, if that makes sense?
Well, I think it's hard to get big too quickly because it's hard to find good people. And if you set the bar really high, and which we do, it means that you're saying no to a lot of people before you get to say yes. So what it means is you actually get pretty exhausted in the search. And I think for our management team, it was pretty stressful for a long period of time when we were really ramping quickly because it meant you had to kiss a lot of frogs to find. And so that is challenging, but it's worth the investment because I think, a bad hire is tough. And, I'm sure you've heard all of those lessons around when you make a bad hire, it's important to recognize that pretty early and make a move. And we've learnt along the way, sometimes we haven't moved as quickly as we'd like. We're lucky we haven't made many bad hires, and I think that's because we put a lot of effort into the process. For us, hiring's a lot about, one is skill set, but more importantly for us is like passion, commitment, shared values. And so that actually gets more challenging to do as you start to involve different cultures and, language barriers and all that sort of stuff. So we still try to work hard at that. I think if you can keep your culture consistent within an organization, it helps weed out, anything that's not right. And it also attracts the right sort of people. And so, you continue to work on that. And take your time. I think, for us, one of our really key hires was our CMO, Jeff, in San Francisco, and that search took us 6 months. And that was pretty exhausting and tough, but we lucked out, got a great guy. But that was a lot of work. We had to actually spend. He doesn't like me talking about it. We actually had to spend a lot of money with a really high quality recruiter to help do that because Silicon Valley is a highly competitive market and CMOs are tough to come by. And so we're lucky in that the core group, Jason and Lachlan and the guys that we have, a lot of our developers are still with us from day one. And so, in fact, all of them are with us. And so it means that we've actually been able to grow within. Our leadership comes from the people that have been employed with us for quite a long time. So we haven't had to worry too much about bringing in external leadership. And then when we have, we've all participated in evaluating them and making sure that they're the right fit for our organization. And so, but, no doubt the dynamic changes. The fact is we run the business from San Francisco now. CMO's there, CFO's there, I'm mostly there. We've got a product manager who's there. And so that, I'm not, that also creates some growing pains because, we kind of, for a long time, everything was here and it was a tiny office in San Francisco and then we slowly grew it. And, now we've got actually a larger office in San Francisco than we do in Australia. But, you just work through it, get better at it. And, we're pretty pleased with how everything's going.
From the US, I know that, was there some guys in Germany that had a slightly similar name or same premise trying to rip you off?
Well, everyone tries to rip us off. It's the internet. So we have lots of copycat, competitors. And, I think that the most celebrated competitor is a group that actually got their logo designed on 99Designs. Wrote their business plan based on their experience and actually raised $3.5 million before we had. So, well before us. And so that was actually a bit of a competitive threat, but we've crushed them. So we have had lots of inspired competitors. Some so inspired that in fact they forget to change the phone number when they've copied our site. So we have had to call them and say, hey, we're receiving your customer support calls. But so now Eva, the general manager of our European operation and the founder of 99Designs, claims that, in fact, she hadn't really heard about us before she came up with the name. And in fact, her background was in agencies. And so the original presence for her name was that she thought the maximum number of designers that you would need to participate in a contest would be 12. And so that's how she came up with the name. And she actually did go and raise, I think, nearly $1 million euros to build her business in Berlin. And then when she was in the sort of capital raising process, that's when she learnt about us, but she continued to go. And so, and then, we were able to acquire her in August of last year. And I think one of the lessons that came out of acquiring her that I think is worth imparting to you guys is that being a little European business, a European business, she's thinking globally from day one, and we think globally from day one too. I think that's one of the special traits about Australian businesses typically is our market's not big enough to sustain us, and so we have to think outside our shores, typically, especially if you're an online business. And so for Eva, it was the same thing. So she's in Germany, and so her investors are actually based in Spain, so they're like, cool, grow in Spain, grow in... So she was in 4 languages in 6 months of her existence. And so what that ultimately meant that was she was unable to really focus on her market, her home market, which was Germany. And so she built a great business in Germany, but it wasn't as good as it could have been if she had just stayed focused on that market. And so why she was attractive to us was that she had 5 people, including herself, and she was servicing 5 languages, with the 4 support staff. So when we looked at her, we're like, well, she understands a lot about being an international business. Berlin seems like a great city in which to operate and have a customer support team and a marketing support team that are multilingual, which is very hard to achieve here in Australia or in San Francisco. But there was a disbursement of her spend that meant that she perhaps wasn't as big as she could have been because she was unable to focus, and she added layers of complexity to her business, which you can't really do when you're a startup. So I think it's been great for us to go through that and talk with her and share those learnings. And now I'm like, cool, it really shows you just how important it is to be laser focused, and certainly laser focused in the beginning. And I think when you start to think about moving outside your market, your home market, or whatever market you're going for in the first instance, you really have to be focused on you have to make sure that you've got scale that can support it, because it's a significant investment, it's hard to do, and it's going to add complexity.
So San Francisco office, Melbourne office,
Berlin.
then Berlin was the third?
Yeah.
And did you keep the 4 languages or the 4 markets she wasn't improved on them?
Yeah, so what we did was we acquired her in August. We actually launched our German site in September. So we were parallel processing the development of our own international capabilities whilst we were talking to her about a potential partnership/acquisition. Because when we did our assessment of that opportunity, we thought we could actually beat her, but she was clearly bigger than us in Germany. We thought, well, if we spent money, we could, over time, we could do it. But we could see an opportunity to actually acquire someone who was talented and passionate about what we did, understood our business, and could help speed that up, and gave us a nice footprint to copy. So since then, we've gone into French, we've gone into Italian, we've gone into Spanish as well. We launched a Dutch site 2 weeks ago. And so we're really doubling down on our investment in Europe. At the same time, we've continued to invest in her platform. Her platform is doing particularly well in Germany still, so it's a home market. So, we're looking at, what we do next. But yeah, it's been a pretty interesting ride. We also have people in Paris and London as well, and we have a small team in the Philippines.
So can you talk a little bit about that merge or that acquisition and how it worked? You said you're still playing with her platform, or did that just become 99Designs overnight?
So they still operates as a separate platform. Good question. I think we basically do everything like a test. So we're very much a minimum viable product kind of organization. We see something, we think there's an opportunity, we try and build the product and get out and test it. And so when we bought another business, we kind of did the same thing. So we're like, cool, let's split test this and let's see what we can learn from 12Design. Because the last thing we wanted to do is be arrogant, buy someone and say, cool, do it our way. What was attractive about 12Designer was that they understood the German market, they understood Europe better than we did. So we'd have been idiots if we just took it over and converted it to our way. So what we did was pumped up her advertising spend, looked at her business model, spent against her model versus ours to see which one performed best. And so, luckily for us, ours did perform better, but what we have learned is their inherent value in what she's built. There's inherent value, particularly in her brand in the German market. And so we're continuing now that we're about 12, not quite 12 months in, 9 months in to the experiment, we're getting some greater clarity about what we're going to do, but for now, makes a lot of sense for us to be able to operate both brands, in particular in that market, because it's it's a nice homegrown brand. It's got empathy with the locals. It's got a much more European flavour to it. So it's working well.
When you say her brand and her market, are you talking Spain?
No,
French,
I'm just
French
talking Germany.
Yeah.
So I think, what was aware for us is that we were bigger than she was in all of her adjacent markets. So all of that effort that she'd gone into in creating these multi-language sites, supporting them in language, hadn't really paid off as well as it could have. And so because she didn't have the money to support it. And so what we've been able to do is when we're kind of taking those over. So those sites are the most logical ones that, as we start to consolidate the brands, then the 12 Designer brand, for example, in Spain is probably the one that we will look to, start to roll back into 99Designs, and in France and in Italy, just because we've got the scale in those markets, and it makes more sense for us to really double down on the brand recognition that we're able to create in those markets.
So what next for 99Designs?
We've got a lot of shit to build, and it's kind of a constant attitude. So we really see that for us, where's the value? We've got this amazing community, over 200,000 designers all around the world that we've paid. I think we've paid over 190 countries today. We've got this great small business customer base, but we're not sort of resting on our laurels. We think, as I've talked about, Qantas is a great way to meet. It's not necessarily a great way to continue to transact. So we're continuing to build out our platform so that we can connect designers and small business owners and entrepreneurs and agencies and all the sorts of people who take advantage of our platform today in a better way. So we're building a bunch of new products. We're also continuing to evaluate new markets to internationalize in. So, I think we've done Europe now for now. So now we're starting to look more aggressively at, Latin America, and we're starting to look at Asia. We've got a bunch of people spending some time in Asia the second half of this year so that we can better understand what the requirements are for that market. There's just a lot to do.
Speaking of your relationship with Melbourne, we have a couple of guys that come here. They're not here tonight though. The guys from Twiggy.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So is there a thing now that you've seen the success about, is there something internally about giving back to the community or whatever? What made you invest? These are guys from Melbourne that got invested from you guys, correct?
Well, not from us directly, but from the founders of 99, so Lenny and Mark and the Cyclone crew. I think that's, we've always been passionate about startups and Mark and Lenny in particular, and so now they're an opportunity to, have time, have some capital to invest. They're interested in doing that. We're all big believers in supporting the local ecosystem. I'm sure that, we're going to take great pride in people who come through 99Designs and go off and eventually create their own thing. I think it's, ultimately, it's, good. It's good for Australia, it's good for Melbourne, and so Ned and those guys are going to be very successful.
Well, it seems to me that a lot of the Australian success stories tend to be guys that go and get money from the US.
Well, I don't know if I think there's lots of Australian success stories that we just don't know about because they're quietly going about it, and then we do learn about it. We do learn about it when something like, a capital raising or a large trade sale happens, and we're like, oh wow. Where did those guys come from, right? I think there's no doubt that Australia is becoming increasingly on the radar. We're really lucky to have, amazing entrepreneurs like Mark, like, Scott and Mike from Atlassian, who have spent 10 years building a real business that's, globally scalable, is being able to self-fund. And so then we see these big numbers being thrown around and we're able to, see these celebrated capital raisings, which I then think trickles down to local community. And so we're seeing more and more Australian startups now getting greater visibility and going on to raise. And it's, there's no doubt it's a lot easier to raise capital in the US than it is here because there is no capital here. Not no capital. I say that a little bit flippantly. There's obviously, I think we're seeing a lot of growth and an exciting growth in incubators and spaces that are allowing early stage investment, but I still think there is still a lot of room for us to grow as an industry and be able to support our own. But is that ultimately necessary? I don't know, because I think as long as we've got people who are passionate here, who are being able to start businesses here, and ultimately if they need funding can find it, then that's okay. You know, I think where it does start to get a little bit concerning is when, you know, there's no job creation in Australia via this mechanism. So where people go straight to the US and don't have any need to do anything here. But that, you know, that's okay. It's the free market, right?
Yeah.
But you know, hopefully, I think, you know, I met with Blackbird Capital yesterday and Nikki and those guys, and I think it's actually a super exciting time. I feel like the Australian marketplace has changed so much in the last 3 years since I've been in San Francisco. I'm just staggered at how many amazing, you know, places there are around. Just in Melbourne, there's a bunch of great places where you can go work and be around other entrepreneurs and, you know, chase your dreams. I saw a bunch of them in Sydney. We're seeing some new venture capitalists crop up. We're also really lucky to be seeing, you know, people like Paul Bassett, you know, who's just an incredible local entrepreneur who's built an amazing business. You know, he raised his first $5 million here in Melbourne from the local community, and that seeks now a $3.5 billion listed entity. And so now we're blessed to have someone like him starting to invest back into the community, you know, set up different funds, different support mechanisms. I think what we're seeing is that as this new wave of entrepreneurs come through, you know, experience their success, then they're able to, you know, find some time to give back. What is for sure is that when you're focused on building your business, you actually have no time for anything. And so, you know, I have to apologize because there's certainly lots of people who reach out to me, and I don't want to be rude, but I don't ever often find time to respond, just because when you're building something, you know, we talked about it, you got to stay focused, and focus just takes a lot of time and energy. But as you experience success, and we're seeing it now as people have managed to put their business on their rat and they find more time, then we're seeing them starting to invest back in the community. So I think hopefully we're starting to see, you know, what will become a golden age. Because, you know, what we've lacked really is, you know, and the reason why the Australian venture community hasn't seen the uplift and the growth as we've seen in other markets is we just haven't had enough homegrown success. You know, that's what's really helped Silicon Valley was those early wins, you know, and so I think, you know, we just need a few more wins on the board, and I think then all of a sudden investors will realize that this is an asset class that makes much more sense, and so we'll start to see more money flow into it. And, you know, I think with Atlassian and others, we're going to see some, you know, great success stories on the horizon. Some investors will make a lot of money, and that'll be good for the broader community as a whole. So, you know, that's one thing that we do also have to get better at Aussies. We actually have to celebrate success, you know, instead of kicking it down, you know, because that's more of our natural inclination is to tear tall poppies down. And in fact, you know, one thing we should also learn from the Americans, we've got to celebrate those guys. You know, I felt embarrassed because you guys clap, but that's clearly like a startup grind thing, you know, it's kind of, there is a lot of rah, and I think we actually have to apply a little bit more rah to what we do.
No, I agree. I think you guys as, you know, pioneers, and like you said, putting runs on the board for Australia, you know, it does get people stop investing in property or whatever, and then, you know, tech is, you know, something that's viable.
Yeah.
I want to open it up now to the audience, if you don't mind, get a few questions. So yeah, thank you very much.
Cool.
That's not going to get around everywhere, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the return on investment for the venture capitalists and what they're looking for?
So
You've given them?
Yeah.
Recapture those questions.
Yeah, so the question was like around return on investment for the investor, and so what are they looking for? You know, that's really hard to define. I think, you know, sort of the general rule of thumb that I use is they're looking for 10 times their money. Right, and so that helps case the opportunity that they're looking for. They'll settle for 5 times their money, but really, you know, early stage investors in particular are, you know, needing people to be swinging for the fences to make that investment work. So it's probably not quite what you want to hear, but I think what you need to be able to do is think about your business model, work out how you can get to the point that you can deliver that kind of 10x, that value uplift.
Sorry, that 10x is over what period?
I mean, I think the periodicity is less important than the absolute number. So, I mean, obviously the sooner you can do it for the investor, the better their IRR will be, which is, you know, their rate of the return. But ultimately, for investors, they want to get the money out and then get it back at that 10x model, because it's really hard to find good businesses to invest in. And so when you do, I think they're less concerned about having it back fast. They just want to know that they're going to get it back, and when they do get it back, it's going to be, a big number.
I think it was the startup genome report or whatever that said, in general, Australians are not thinking big enough. Do you find that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's, I don't know, do we not think big enough, or do we don't want to give away much? I don't know. I think the thing is that we're still, we are pretty obsessed with our one idea, and we don't really see, we haven't had enough experience, any of us, at sort of the multiple success cases, which is what, the US entrepreneurs have been able to replicate. So you kind of see the same names crop up again and again. I think Square's a celebrated case of, one guy moving from a pretty amazing business in Twitter and then, creating something equally amazing in Square. And we just, we haven't quite seen that happen here yet. And I think what we do is kind of get very focused on our one opportunity, and then we really do worry about how much we're giving away, because we're not sure that we'll ever find another opportunity again. And so hopefully we start to continue, I think we see some more successes, and then perhaps your first startup, you'll be less focused on making this the home run for you. You're actually more prepared to give a bit more away, so that you can kind of demonstrate to an investor that they're going to get the return that they're looking for. And you may not quite get what you want out of it, but at least you get on, you start your journey, you build some credibility, hopefully you create a return for them, and then, the world is your oyster, right? Because there's no doubt that success breeds success, and you can move forward from there.
So a couple more questions. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, moving away from the money topic into more of the core values and mission statement, company building, and company culture sort of things. Obviously, you guys have grown from a small company into a much larger organisation. How have you managed the change in sort of all those aspects along the way? And how have you empowered the employees to come up with new innovative ideas, and what do you see as like the biggest limitation, the biggest advantage of your company culture?
Wow, that's a good question. Did everyone capture that? Because I'm not sure I can repeat it, because it was multifaceted, but it's a great question. So really it was around, culture, empowering the people, and then scaling that. Is that kind of a reasonable encapsulation of it? So, I think for culture, we've remained pretty flat. I think hopefully everyone in our team would feel that anyone's accessible, and there's no mortgage on good ideas. I think it's important that from the leadership team down, that everyone continues to extol that. And so it is very important that we all are there, and we just continue to listen. We built a business based on listening to our customers and our designers, and iterating and thinking about what we're hearing from them to build a great product. And so now what we do is we listen not only to them, but we're listening to everyone within our organisation. I think the other thing that we're focused on is hiring bright young people and then helping to see them grow. I think, the thing that I find the most rewarding thing about this role and working for a business like 99Designs is seeing how our team's grown, and how, for example, the two young guys that we hired in the customer support roles in San Francisco, well, one of them now is in the marketing team, and another one's a designer on the product team. And so it's kind of like nice to see that. And so I think if you can demonstrate that there's growth opportunities inside an organisation, we've got, guys who started as junior developers are now team leaders of, their own product. I think that helps build the sort of culture you're looking for. Trying to limit the bullshit in the organisation is tough, but it's something we work really hard on. We also try to really keep our company culture pretty whole. So we stole a few things from SidePoint. So we celebrate every year with a 2-day Christmas party. So we do that here in Australia. But we also now do it in the US. We're encouraging the Europeans to do it, and it's a real way. So we really do hide it. We enjoy spending time together. We do Friday night drinks. I think this is a great example of it. When we started in San Francisco, the first parties were at my house. and so everyone would sleep over, right? So because I live a little bit out of the city because couldn't afford to live in the city when we moved over there, and it's good to be out of town, but everyone would stay over. And so we've basically continued that tradition. So when we ever have a posse of Australians turn up, we typically have a party still at my house. It's getting harder and harder to contain. Last year we had our management offsite on-site, so we brought all of the team together in San Francisco because we had this new office and we just all wanted to hang out in it still. But so we did all of our yearly planning together, and then the last thing that we did together as a management team was basically a MasterChef challenge. So my wife organised it where we basically had everyone come, the management team come to our house. There was like 8 of us. The 2 most junior members of the team became then team captains. They selected, drafted us in. I think I was officially the last person chosen. And then we got money, we ran out, we actually had to buy our supplies, come up with menus, and then we cooked for the entire team. So then the whole team came to our house for, our typical party. We cooked, competed, bribed, and eventually, surprisingly, my team was successful in the end. But so I think that's an example, right? You just got to keep working at it, communicating it, and try and live it. And that's hard, For that company planning session, we surveyed all of our employees before going into it. We asked everyone to provide their ideas, and I think people are starting to see that their ideas get implemented. Things that people have talked to us about. They start to see, and so that then makes the organisation feel empowered.
Does that go to the as far as say SitePoint did, where a couple of guys come to you and go, "We've got this idea that's pretty much another company"?
Yeah, I think with SitePoint, I think all of SitePoint's good ideas have typically come from looking at some sort of behaviour that was occurring first, someone identifying it. There's not often that we've seen complete greenfield ideas come up, but we are starting to see that now as the business is evolving. I think Lenny's probably better to talk to about that. You should bring him in one day.
No, was there 2 guys, say, from 99Designs that you would let work on something else like that and do the same kind of thing?
No, because we're laser focused. There's too much stuff to build. So my preference would be, but what we do is, we have things like R&D days. So I think, a day a fortnight, the devs get to work on a project of their choice. As those ideas start to take shape, then people can call on resources to sort of flesh those out. So it's kind of helping create an innovative culture. We've also broken up into our development team into much smaller product pods. So in a way, it's a way of empowering small teams to build stuff, but they're still building stuff that ultimately we've agreed as a management team and as a board, and it's part of our business plan, but people know that they can actually come up with an idea that could become part of that. And so I think that helps keep us, entrepreneurial. I think the only other thing that we do culturally is make sure that we never hire too far ahead of the curve, right? I've got kind of it's not really a rule of thumb, but it's something we sort of apply. We always whenever we hire someone, they start with about 1.5 times the amount of work that they can handle. And so everyone kind of always feels underwater at 99Designs. And so that helps keep you, I'm sure all of you who are working on your own thing feel underwater all the time. And so that's part of actually being a startup, is always fighting a little bit for resources, always feeling like there is too much to do. Because I think, to your point, death of culture is when all of a sudden someone looks around and sees someone sitting in the corner like, what the hell's Mac working on? And if he's been not working on anything useful for a long period of time, then you realize that there's something wrong with your organization. So it's really important to make sure that when you hire, you've got a ton of work for people to do.
Was there a company or a group of people that you hired to grow your business to help you to focus?
No, but our board helps us focus. I think, we get to interplay, we all get to spend a little bit of time talking to other people. I think inherently, I don't know, I'm pretty focused and insane, so that helps push
So
through.
from that business plan and then expanding
Mhm.
to the other countries,
Mhm.
that was just something that you guys came up with?
Yeah, I mean, it's collectively what we've thought about. We've tested them. I think the first time we talked about internationalization was like an iteration after our first business plan, when we started to think, well, if we're going to talk to investors, what would we spend money on? When we started to think about that, and it was something we identified as a great way to grow. We learnt about some of that when we were talking to other like businesses, and they would say, hey, yeah, we went into Germany and we saw this massive uplift. And when we started to provide, in language, like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because we've seen it ourselves, right? We were a .com, we put a team over there, and we saw it, our home market, which is the US, grow really aggressively. Then, one of the first countries we actually localized for when we took our investment from our first internationalization project was Australia. And so we started taking payments in AUD and put the phone number on the site and etc. And so, we kind of, we've been able to iterate on that. And then, we're pretty lucky, right? We've got this amazing board. We've got a couple of guys from Excel on our board who, one in particular, Andrew, I talk to all the time. He provides a lot of insight, helps keep us really focused on what it is that we should be doing. We've got a guy called Michael Deering on our board who, was a fairly early employee at eBay. He's been around, a very successful investor in marketplace businesses, so he helps guide us. One of the things that comes with being in a place like Silicon Valley and then having investors like Excel is that you get to meet a bunch of really smart people. And I think it's important. One of the things that I certainly feel, luckily I've got a team who are considerably smarter than I am, and I think too when I meet people my first thing is, well, I'm going to learn a lot from this conversation. And so we're able to have a bunch of those conversations. And the reason why we ultimately went with Excel, one of the reasons was from day one, they started introducing us to people within their network, and that was also a bit of an aha moment for us. We're like, oh shit, this is what this Silicon Valley thing is about. Because first of all, Mark and I were sitting in there. It was my very first trip with him to San Francisco, so we're really looking just to case out a place to live and where we're going to put an office. And so and he's like, these Excel guys have been pinging me. Do you think we should talk to them? We're going to be in Palo Alto to visit a partner. I'm like, yeah, Excel. If you looked at their portfolio, Etsy, Dropbox, Facebook. And so then we were like, yeah, so we'll just turn up. And then when we're sitting there, we both started to actually get a little bit nervous because they've got these, like a big TV that looks straight at you. And so there's like Zuckerberg's face, like group buy, okay, well, this is the real deal. And then when we met with them, what we were amazed by was how much they knew about our business, how much they thought about our space, how big they thought the opportunity was, and how liberal they were going to be. And so they looked and they said, so is there anyone in our portfolio that you'd be interested in meeting? And we're like, yeah, we love Dropbox. And so, literally, Drew called us on their phone, and they're pretty good at manipulating entrepreneurs, I must admit. I've been on the other side of this once I took their money, so Drew just called us and spoke to us about, and said, oh yeah, I love you guys. And we were like, oh wow. And then we were actually planning a trip to New York as part of this trip, and so we're like, oh, we really love Etsy. And they're like, cool. And so the next minute we had a meeting with the founder, Rob, and their new CEO, Maria, and their new CTO, who's now the CEO. And we spent a couple of hours just talking marketplaces with those guys. And so it was just like, no promise of money, nothing. It was just like them demonstrating to us, this is what, network brings. And you just learn a ton from that, So we had similar experiences with Michael.
So was that the investors going, yeah, talk to Etsy, they just went in, they'll tell you about how they went into Germany or something like that?
Yeah, so it's like share everything. You talk about payments, you talk about product development, you talk about how do you manage product teams, all this, whatever's on your mind. Yeah.
All right, well, look, I'll take one last question and then, yeah, go ahead.
In the early days,
Mm-hmm.
when you're sort of very much startup,
Mm-hmm.
what are your thoughts, experience on the split of equity between A, partners, and B, your initial hires,
Mm-hmm.
and the sort of, the devil in the detail and
Yeah.
what kind of shares and, You know, should he just pay people as much as possible, not give away equity, or, you know, do a split? I mean, there's so many ways.
Yeah, there's so many.
It could be carved out.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts are, one, doing it in Australia sucks. And the one thing the federal government could do is roll back the laws that they've changed on options, because options are really hard to give, right? I think two, so therefore you, as a founder, you're probably looking at just giving away straight equity, because I think it's hard to actually make an option scheme work. I mean, that's been my experience when I've looked at it. Like, it's a pain. So I don't think it is easy. You know, I think my experience was in the early days, and you know, I think we're still trying to communicate to our team that options are going to be valuable one day. But I think Australians typically are pretty skeptical, because just we haven't seen any of our mates get rich from options yet, and so you know, I think that makes them less valuable. I don't know. I mean, I think you know, the SciPoint experience has been that you know, you don't have to give away a ton, and that you can stay pretty focused. And then as people build position inside the organisation and build your trust, and you realise that they're people that you want to reward and keep around, then that's a good time to give equity, rather than giving it at the upfront. So no promise at the beginning. It's actually an earned reward, and that seems to be also a pretty effective way of, you know, developing good retention. It doesn't necessarily help on the hiring piece at the upfront bit. So then it is really about selling on the vision. I think people will go work, you know, for less than they can make somewhere else, if they feel like they're doing something they can really believe in. So that's kind of, I think, what you're searching for. You know, if you want to get super technical, if you are going to give away stuff, then it's probably best to just give everyone the same thing. I don't believe in convoluted structures. I think as soon as death of a startup is the first slide that you present to an investor is your structure and the way in which you've structured your equity, you're in a lot of trouble. It means you spend too much time thinking about future success and not enough time focused on actually creating success, in my experience. And so I think it's, you know, there's a few things that you can think about to make sure that you protect yourself a little bit, but try not to get too fancy, I think, is you know, I think that as soon as it becomes too sophisticated an instrument, if investors are trying to push something to you that you're struggling to understand, then that's probably a good sign that they're the wrong investor for you, and you should really push back. And likewise, if you're sharing, if you've met people that you really want to be involved in, then just give them a small piece of your pie, and just, I wouldn't give it out too liberally to too many, because I think, you know, you can run into problems as if you bring in an investor and all of a sudden they look at a share register and, you know, Nan's got some, and, you know, everyone, there's 30 or 40 people on it, then, you know, you might do well to actually have one investment vehicle that you have family and friends in, and maybe some early employees, and they're represented as one block, and then the rest of the structure's pretty clean. That's probably a whole night talking about that stuff, but happy to have a quick chat afterwards. Cool.
All right, I want everyone on their feet again. All right, a big round of applause for Patrick. Thank you very much.
Welcome to the Startup Grind.